You're listening to The Roots, a podcast from Minnesota AMA District 23 ARMCA. I'm your host, Jackie Reese. Let's dive deeper into what makes our district so great. This podcast was prepared by an independent contractor and may not be the views of the Board of Directors of District 23 ARMCA or any of their sponsors or affiliates. Hey everybody, before we get into episode 17 of The Roots, part 2 with Nick Swenson, check out that first episode. Nick really talks a lot about his background growing up, his preparation for racing ISDE, and now we're going to get into his whole race, the experiences he had in Italy, what it was like getting to Italy, what it was like during the race, how hectic it really was for him. And we even answer a few listener questions. So thank you for tuning in to episode 17 of The Roots, and thank you to the sponsors of District 23 ARMCA that make this possible. Fly Racing, Nomura Technologies, BCMX Adventure Park, Moto City Raceway, Burn Benders Raceway, and Motokazi Race Promotions. Let's hear some more from Nick. Okay, so you go to the National Enduro, you break your collarbone, you're pretty banged up. 1 week later, you got to get on the plane to go to Italy. What was it like traveling there in the first place, traveling during a pandemic, and how are you feeling going into the race?
Well, I've never been out of the country other than one trip to Mexico, and I got a good friend who actually raced 6 days for Team Canada up in Thunder Bay. So I go up and see him a few times. So this is like completely surreal to me. The plane was kind of tough. Like I'm not a mask guy, so that was just difficult. I hadn't worn one here in a while, but I knew Italy was a little more strict as far as public places and such. So I kind of was mentally prepared for that. But the flight was all right. I think it was 9 hours from JFK to Milan. But then like stepping off, I'm like, whoa, like where am I? And so at this point, I think we went, it's like a week and a half before the race started still. So we had time. We have friends over in Milan. So we spent a couple nights with them. And at that point, it was still like a vacation to me. I was still like mentally prepared, but wasn't thinking about racing yet. We didn't go to the track until the Monday. So like 7 days before the race started. And that's when, everybody's kind of at the team hotel. You're hanging out with Ryan Sipes and Taylor Robert, and these big names. Like, okay, we're here to do some business now. But yeah, that whole week before, I was like, okay, I think I can hold my own. Like, we're all really fast guys, but it's just super cool to kind of be in that atmosphere of this is the USA. Like, we're all we got now. So it was super, super cool. One thing that was really different that I wasn't expecting was like the food. I ended up teaming up with these hooligans, one from South Carolina and one from Missouri, and then Tanner Whipple from Illinois. And we kind of tackled the whole driving a rental car and walking the tests, which is a big deal together. So we didn't realize that when you go to a restaurant there, you don't just like sit down and get a meal or get a menu and order your food. No, we sat down and they started bringing out entree after entree after entree of these foreign meats and foods and like cheese curd looking things. And we're there for like 2 hours. So we didn't walk as many sections that day. But it was just like, I wasn't preparing for that. So it was tough to like maintain the right food in my body. Like I was trying to, keep up on eating correctly, just to keep my body ready for like what's about to happen to it. And I could have done that a little better, I think. But that whole first week or so was very strange.
So eventually did you got accustomed to it, or was it always just like, yeah, this is foreign? Or maybe when the racing started, you're like, okay, I'm comfortable with this part of it.
Yeah, I definitely got accustomed to it, but like we were, I got out of that vacation stage and I was like, okay, now we're racing. We're going to, be walking every day, but still it was like 15, 16-hour days. Sometimes we weren't eating till 9 o'clock because we just got done walking a 7-mile section that took us 3 hours. So, it was full on. It wasn't like we were out sightseeing. This was like, it's like we're racing. So that whole week kind of leading up to it was like game time. But then like once it started, there was nothing I was thinking about. I was like, I'm just a racer this week. Doesn't matter what's going on at home. And I really took it seriously. I remember telling myself, whenever I was having an issue, whenever maybe it was like, oh man, I'm getting tired. Like I kept telling myself, I can do this. I will do this. And I'm prepared for this, I kept saying that to myself. And eventually I just stopped like thinking about the problem, which was huge because we were riding. Some people might not understand what kind of the event is. We were riding 140 miles a day for 7 hours a day, with 700 other people. And I think there was six sections along that route that you were timed to go as fast as you can. So it was extremely challenging, both mentally and physically, just to focus when you needed to focus, and then like ride smart when you needed to ride smart, but then also keep the bike together. Like that was huge. So I learned so much. I can keep going.
Well, luckily I have more questions for you.
Cool.
So my next question for you is actually, what is the format of the race? Because I'm like vaguely familiar with, okay, you race for 6 days in a row. But like, when do you stop and you have to work on your own bike? These sections where you're timed to go as fast as you go, like, how does that all fit together in one day of the 6 days of this race?
So here I am about to go to bed to race the next morning, and I'm asking myself the same questions. Like, so essentially, we put our bikes into an impound Friday before the race. The race started Monday. We couldn't touch the bike. Nobody can touch it. It's race prepped. They had scratched the bike, or the muffler, the frame, the engine, and both hubs. Those parts you can't change. If you do, you're disqualified. Monday morning comes around. I'm assigned a number. Essentially, I start with 3 other guys at this given time. And this race is against the clock. So we start from impound and we transfer to we start the first transfer section. And so there was probably 5 different transfer sections per day. And so along the transfer section, there's going to be a point where you kind of come up, and on this transfer, you can be riding through a village, you can be riding down pavement, you can be riding up a 500-year-old road. And when I say road, like we were riding up like stone roads that they apparently used to bring salt back from the sea, which is beyond me. I should probably take some history lessons there. But so yeah, we transfer to a special test is what they call it. And we get to a special test, and there's a big crowd, and you've got to find the Team USA guy. You take your Camelback. They'll tell you anything that's challenging there. Sketchy turn kind of first few quarters, or watch it, it's really dusty or it's really slippery, which is very nice to have. A lot of countries didn't have that help, which kind of later in the week was pretty nice, because you can kind of, everybody was getting a vibe and we could kind of rely on them. So then you'd basically line up to go into this section, and there'd be a countdown clock going every 20 seconds, and you had to go within that 20 seconds. And you essentially enter the section, you ride as fast as you can, and all of the trails were 20 feet wide, like really wide, really fast, third, fourth gear on my 400, wide open. And then you get done, that you look at your time, that somebody will, show you, okay, cool. Dang it, I got beat by that much. Put your stuff back on, and then keep riding, go to the next one. And so after that, though, you'd kind of maybe ride for 45 minutes, maybe an hour, and then you'd get to what they call a check. And at a check, it's a checkpoint, you'll pull in. There would be a Team USA van with a bunch of mechanics, factory mechanics like Factory Husqvarna, Factory KTM, Honda had a couple mechanics there. Yamaha had a couple. Super cool because I'm not a factory rider, but that week I was. Like, they were filling up my fuel can. They could change my oil and they could help me bleed brakes. Those are the only things that they can do. So I'd pull in, look at my watch. Okay, I have to be out of this check through this little timing scoring thing in like 8 minutes. Dang. I had this whole list in my head. Like, I got to tighten my spokes. I got to maybe change an air filter. Maybe I need to fill my Camelback. Obviously, I need to eat food. So a lot would happen in those 8 minutes. And then all of a sudden, it's like, Swenson, you got 2 minutes. You better get up there. Oh, man, I didn't even sit down. So then you get back on the bike and go do it again for another couple hours. And then you'd pull up into the next check. You have kind of a list going. Oh, maybe I tweak my bars, or maybe we were changing air filters 3 times a day. So swapped an air filter, eat more food, drink water. And then, just kind of repetitive until the end of the day. And once you get back to the last section of the day, there's a transfer coming out of the last special test. You get to the checkpoint right before impound again. And you go through that checkpoint. And at that point, I'll have a couple of minutes before I go through there to look at my bike, communicate with the team. Okay, once I go through this checkpoint, I'm going to have 15 minutes to work on my bike. And that's on the clock. Nobody can touch it. But I kind of would communicate to them, okay, I need to do both tires. I need to do an air filter, or one day I did a clutch lever. Fortunately, I didn't have any other bigger issues. I did brake pads and stuff a couple of days too, but nothing serious. Like, I wasn't ever swapping like a radiator, maybe bars or something, which was nice because that just keeps your mind clear, keeps everything kind of moving, focused on riding good and not bummed out. So I'd get to this check, and I'd have a couple minutes, tell them, okay, I'm going to do my air filter, I'm going to do my tires. And then I'd, grab my tool bag real quick, loosen up the front axle, loosen up the rear axle, and loosen up my front lug nuts and front lug bolts, however you want to call them. Ride through the check, have 15 minutes. And that's where I was pretty nervous going into this point. Like, I've changed a lot of tires in my day, but when you're on the clock after riding for 7 hours a day, to change 2 tires and an air filter in 15 minutes, I was kind of nervous, to be honest with you. So luckily I never had any issues. I think I was getting it done in like 11 minutes, and then I'd have plenty of time to do an air filter. So it's funny because 11 minutes to me was like, I was stoked. Like, I think it was like 8 minutes for a rear and 3.5, 4 for the front. And that's on and tight, and the rim lock's tight and everything. But then there's this other guy next to me from California. His name's Anson, and he was doing front tire and rear tire back on the bike in 5.5 minutes. So I was just like, man, you're making us look bad, dude. So we kind of had a little competition there. It was super fun. Like, everybody's friendly, and we're egging each other on. But after that, you get back on the bike and ride it into impound, and can finally take my helmet off. Like that, I just remember that feeling at the end of the day, walking back to the pits. Was like, oh, such a fun day, but just relieved, like you made it to that point, made it through the day. Maybe you're bummed out about crashing or maybe not having a good time, but still like I'm still here, I'm still going. Just everybody's kind of like keep the ball rolling. Toughest days are day 1 and day 5, they say. So that if I did a decent job explaining it, I might not have, but that's kind of how it works. So there's transfer sections, checkpoints, and special tests, essentially.
So what all of that gets scored?
So good question. It all kind of gets scored, but really what matters is your special test. And there's, like I said, 5 or 6 of those every day. But you can get penalized, and that's a huge thing if you're not maybe going a good pace on your transfer section. So you say, oh, I'm not getting timed here. Like, why do I have to go fast? Okay, so like I would do, like on my first day, I was having issues with my helmet. So I would pull over and like I was really uncomfortable. So that day I didn't have as much time at each section, but I still had enough. But let's say I had another problem and I pull into my check and I got to work my bike and then I go through the check. Well, maybe I was supposed to come in through the check a couple of minutes before. Well, I get penalized those 2 minutes and they get added onto my score. So penalties are huge in that if you get them, they can be detrimental. Like it's a lot harder for a guy like me to make up 2 minutes than it is to lose them. So your special tests though are pretty much all that matter as far as like a racing standpoint. But there are, you know, the rest of the racing, you know, that can totally ruin your effort in a way.
Gotcha. My last question about the event itself. You're racing for the U.S. club team. What does that mean?
The club team is the team that the United States sends for the regional pro riders, essentially. There are guys from the East Coast and West Coast. And when I said earlier that there was a qualifier series, and they take 7 people, that's from the East Coast, and that's how I qualified. But they also take 7 from the West Coast. And so all of us kind of get mixed up and put into groups of teams, and we each get assigned 2 other teammates. And so we're all on the same team, but just the way that the race is kind of scored, they put us on groups of 3 teams. And so that's what makes up the club teams. But then on top of that, we have a trophy team, just like Motocross Nations. And then we have a junior trophy team. And those guys are pro riders, pro off-road riders from West Coast, East Coast, GNCC, Works, stuff like that. And they get hand selected by AMA reps. They don't have to qualify or anything. But then there's also women's pro or women's trophy. And I actually shout out to them. They actually kicked the butt. They won by like 10 or 15 minutes in the week. Wow. So yeah, they destroyed. It was crazy. Nice. So it was cool to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. So we talk about all this hecticness really going on every single day. In any of that time, did you have an opportunity to like have some favorites of what was happening during your experience on the track?
Favorite sections, yeah. Some sections I didn't like. We rode on this riverbed in this transfer section for probably 3 or 4 miles. That was really cool because there's just mountains on each side, and I'm like, I was like taking it in, and that was tough because I was like struggling with staying focused on the transfer sections because that's where I was falling, and that's where my bike was getting all messed up. So I wasn't like focusing on what I was looking at. I was focusing on maybe the scenery or, wow, I'm in Italy, this is awesome. But then I'd all of a sudden wash out and be like, oh man, my arm's all messed up and my bars are tweaked now. So yeah, like I was enjoying like riding through villages and stuff. But every time I caught myself maybe doing that, I was like, no, back to racing. Like, so it was a balance. It definitely was. We had a good time kind of before, like walking the tests and taking all that in. Um, there were some really wild sections that they make them so everybody can kind of get through them. But like, I've never ridden on stuff so steep. I've been out to the Rocky Mountains, and yeah, that stuff's really steep, but you're not going third or fourth gear across stuff that's really steep like that. So, um, there's so many moments where uh, it was kind of surreal. It was just like cool feelings, more so like, wow, I'm a factory rider type feeling, or these guys are kind of like catering to me, which is cool, or riding from the hotel in the morning, and it's 7:30 in the morning, and you just ate as much food as you could eat in the morning, and head into the race and pulling in, and there's 700 or 600 bikes, right? In impound, excuse me. And it was cool. Like, just the whole atmosphere of the event. Like, it was pretty surreal. We couldn't talk to some people, because maybe they didn't speak English, but dirt bike language is kind of one language. Like, everybody knows what an exhaust is, or a tire, or so we were talking to, like, I have friends now that I met that I follow in Italy. I have friends from Sweden, and so that's probably some of the coolest experiences that I kind of took away from it was meeting people, and just the whole experience of, wow, like, it was just so surreal. I've never raised something like that, so kind of
Yeah.
speechless.
Yeah, I mean, I think that even relates back to the local level, right? Like the first motocross race you ever had, or the first off-road race you ever had, you feel like that, right? And you made a friend, and that's why you wanted to come back. So I think it translates back to people who might be listening to this, that same feeling, but you're on a totally different scale of how that feels, I feel like.
Sure, yeah. You go to a pro motocross race or at Spring Creek, and you're like, wow, this isn't even, whoa. It's just, yeah, it was on that scale, and it's something that I'll remember for the rest of my life, definitely.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about the challenging terrain. And so my question for you is, what was the most challenging? Was it physical? Was it mental? Was it on the bike? What were the biggest challenges for you over those 6 days of riding?
Um, the biggest challenge is, like I said, we're focusing. It's always been huge for me. I notice I make mistakes when all of a sudden I'm not focused on what's right in front of me, maybe the trail, or um, the feature or whatever I'm going over. But yeah, like, there's a point I realized that your body reaches physically, and that happened to me on day 3, where I kind of reached a level where, like, my arms were already pumped out to the max, and my legs luckily weren't cramping yet, but they were really tired. So I knew, like, that probably wasn't going to go away for the rest of the race. Um, but between that, I think I got really bad monkey butt every day. So I was wearing, what do you call them? Mountain bike shorts, the padded ones.
Mhm.
Uh, Felt kind of strange, but it was a lifesaver. Just little things like that I didn't. Thank God I didn't get blisters at all, which I have to contribute to just riding every day and building up those calluses beforehand. Um, but yeah, it was tough mentally, just getting back to the hotel at late at night, after eating and taking a nice cold shower, getting in bed, and bam, there's the alarm. Do it again. Uh, I was coming to the track and just getting deja vu every day. So, pretty cool experience. Pretty surreal to be able to say that, but it's tough. Day 4 and 5. Maybe it weren't as of course they're physically demanding. They just it was mentally draining, I should say. I fell 3 consecutive sections on day 5, which really bummed me out because I didn't crash until day 4 in a section, like a special test. Um, and so I think I just wasn't focused, and I clipped a tree once really hard in one enduro special test, and I went down really hard. And, my goggles are all messed up, and my clutch lever is broken. So like now I got to fix my bike at the next section or the next test, and a checkpoint, I should say. And my head's all out of whack, and I was just like, all right, you just got to take a deep breath, refocus, and realize like it's 6 days. If this is the worst day that I have, crashing 3 consecutive sections, like I'm having a pretty good week. Like we know how it is. You tip over, you crash sometimes. That's just the nature of the beast. And those days though were pretty tough mentally. Yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine. I've raced 3 days in a row and I'm just like, yep, nope, I'm over it. So I can't imagine double that amount of time. How did you end up? What were your results? How did it go for you overall?
So I ended up 15th overall in club out of 509 people. I was the second club rider to Cole Martinez, who's a factory Honda pro rider out on the West Coast. So I was stoked. I was really pumped. I was doing well all week. And so kind of how they organized you after day one was random as far as timing wise. How they organized you is how you made it through each section. But day 2 is when they put you based in order. So every day I was with these big, like top guys. And so it was super cool. I knew all week I was doing great. People were telling me I was. I'm the type of guy that doesn't like to look at the results. It'll get in my head. Like I said, I'm huge on focusing. So I wasn't like watching how I was doing per se. Wasn't like staying up at night like, oh, 20 seconds down. I would just quick like look at the numbers. Okay, I'm 15th, 16th. But no, I was really happy. I did better than I was expecting for my first time. And I beat Nate Furter every day, 6 days in a row, which I was stoked on. Shout out to him. I think part of that is I was riding every day, and really for me, like that's always kind of been how if I'm gonna do well in a series or in a year, it really my result is based on how much I was riding that year. And so I always say to dudes like, how do I get better? It's you got to ride more. And Nate really wasn't riding a whole lot this summer, and so I think it definitely has to do with like why I beat him. But no excuses. I got him, and until next time, I'm the new king in town. I think. So, just kidding.
Well, we have a few listener questions for you.
Cool.
Again, Reese asked, do you prefer the 300 Red Moto or the 400 Red Moto?
Good question. So I raced in Italy. I raced 400 Honda 4-stroke, which is a 450 down tune to a 400 with a cylinder kit. And the other option is a 250 with a big bore. And so both are good bikes. Personally, I have to ride a 250F more aggressively, more on the throttle versus this 450. I can kind of ride more like momentum wise. So I really love the 400. I think it's an awesome bike. And even a 450, like you down tune or re-gear a 450, any brand, I think I would do better on it than a 250F, just because I can ride more in control. I'm not the type of guy who's going to go out there and hold it wide open, but I can if I need to. It's just like I said, I'm a more controlled rider now, I think, in my career. So yeah, the 400 for sure.
Cool. And then Christy Grote asked, with one ISDE under your belt, what would you do differently? And what advice do you have for someone who wants to do an ISDE?
Very good question, Christy. I I do a lot of things different. Looking back, I would have the bike more prepped before I sent it. I think my old man and I were like scrambling to get things done. Another thing I didn't mention was I almost got disqualified before the race even started because I didn't have a CE approved chest protector. So next time I'm going to bring one of those. Luckily, some dude from Achereby's brought a couple fresh from the factory there and just handed them to me. I didn't pay him or anything. So super cool. So I'd be a little more prepared. I kind of would just know what to expect more. Staying hydrated, I'd pack a bunch of food in my shipping container, like in my crate. Some guys had like protein bars and stuff like that. Like, yeah, you can send that with your luggage, but I would just send more because you couldn't like go to the grocery store and say like, let's get sandwich stuff. Well, no, you ain't gonna. That's just not gonna happen. Like we didn't even know what we were buying half the time. So, as far as advice for someone who wants to go, I'd say do it while you can, if you can, because I knew it was going to be an awesome experience, but I really didn't think it was going to be such a like fun experience. Like, yeah, I've been to a lot of places racing dirt bikes, and I've had a lot of fun doing it, but that was by far the funnest race I've ever done. The conditions are really tough. It was really dusty, but it wasn't even about the conditions. It was about the whole atmosphere and the vibes and the experience. And fortunately, my family was there too, and we could kind of just share that. But if anybody's listening who maybe has the speed or isn't even an off-road rider, you would kick butt in it because if you're a motocross rider, for example, like Ryan Sipes, he overalled the race a couple years ago, and he's a motoer. So I think anybody could do it, and anybody who's into dirt bikes it'd be life-changing. There's people who have gone so many times. I know one of the guys was helping me out. He had a lot of these weird tricks that he'd learned over the years, and he's been 35 times. Now he uses his 2 weeks of vacation every year to go help out the team. Wow. So Nate Furter's been like 4 times now. And so before I went, I was like, dude, like, come on, like, isn't it kind of getting old? But no, it's like, I want to go next year. It's in France. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, that is my last question for you. What does the future look like? Are you going to do it again?
I'd love to. It was a lot as far as planning, buying a second motorcycle. Maybe, I don't want to say no, but if I'm going to do a national circuit again next year or try to do it, I probably won't have the time or money for this. But in the future, I definitely want to do it again. I hope it comes to the United States. I think a lot of people who maybe didn't consider it, maybe for whatever reason, would consider it. But yeah, I'm definitely going to do it again at some point. I just don't know when.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's been great chatting with you, Nick. We've really taken our time here, but it's been awesome. I've been personally interested for, since the race ended, how it went for you and what it was like. So thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, it's been great chatting.
And that's it for episode 17 of The Roots with Nick Swenson. Like I said before, we talked for almost an hour about his experience, and it was just truly incredible to hear about everything that he has gone through and what his plans for the future are. So we are truly proud to have Nick as a part of District 23 ARMCA, and we're also thankful for the sponsors that make this district happen. Fly Racing, Nimura Technologies, BCMX Adventure Park, Moto City Raceway, Burn Benders Raceway, and Motokazi Race Promotions. Hey, and if you haven't already, share this episode with a friend or two. I'm sure they would love to hear Nick's story, and hit that subscribe button wherever you're listening. See you in 2 Mondays. Thanks for joining us. Catch us every other Monday wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on our YouTube page.